Imagine waking up one morning to find out your language, government and economy have all been reshaped, not by your own leaders, but by a distant power with little concern for your traditions or autonomy. That's the story of Puerto Rico, Guam and Samoa under US rule. Welcome to Voices from the Colonized, where we bring forward perspectives often silenced in mainstream narratives. Make sure to like, share and subscribe, and check the description below for ways to help us financially so we can continue amplifying these stories. US imperialism in Puerto Rico. Annexation and military rule. Puerto Rico came under US control in the summer of 1898 during the Spanish-American War. US forces invaded in July and by mid-August had captured the island. On October 18, 1898, General John R. Brooke formally raised the US flag over Puerto Rico. The Treaty of Paris, signed December 10, 1898, effective April 1899, ceded Puerto Rico, then Puerto Rico, from Spain to the US, imposing colonial governance. In April 1900, Congress passed the Foraker Act, enacting a civil government but retaining US executive control, a governor and executive council appointed by the US president, and half the legislature likewise appointed. Only the House of Delegates was elected by Puerto Ricans. Puerto Rican citizenship was established as distinct, and American nationality conferred, but full constitutional rights were withheld. Economic restructuring and labor. The island was reoriented to serve US economic interests, focusing on sugar and tobacco plantations owned by US corporations. Small farmers were dispossessed, wages were extremely low, and employment declined even as industrialization progressed. Operation Bootstrap in the 1940s and 50s encouraged US investment via massive tax exemptions in exchange for cheap labor, shifting Puerto Rico toward export-oriented industrial production. Women in needlework trades toiled for cents per hour to feed mainland markets. Political status and resistance. Although Puerto Ricans were granted US citizenship under the Jones-Shafroth Act of 1917, political power remained controlled by Washington. The Insular Cases, early 1900s, cemented the idea that territories were foreign in a domestic sense, limiting constitutional protections. Political representation was minimal. Puerto Rico elects a resident commissioner to Congress but cannot vote on legislation. Movements for independence, statehood and enhanced autonomy have long been active but consistently marginalized. Environmental and social consequences. Between 1904-1003, the US Navy used the island of Vieques for bombing practices, devastating the environment and impacting public health. Protests in 1999 eventually led to base closure, but lingering contamination and infrastructure abandonment remain challenges. Today, grassroots movements also tackle environmental degradation like mangrove restoration to resist ongoing ecological harm and reclaim resilience. US imperialism in Guam, acquisition and naval control. Under the Treaty of Paris, 1898, Guam was ceded by Spain to the US to solidify American presence in the Asia-Pacific. It quickly became a key naval station and strategic foothold. Military administration and limited self-rule, Guam was placed under naval administration. From around 1900, rotating US Navy officers governed the island, often limiting local Chamorro influence. By 1917, Governor Roy Smith established the first Guam Congress, appointed advisory body, followed in 1931 by an elected, bicameral legislature, though still advisory only. Real authority remained with the Navy and US authorities. Cultural assimilation via education. American-imposed education overhauled indigenous practices. English replaced Chamorro in classrooms. Curricula promoted American civic values, and American teachers were imported. The shift aimed at assimilating youth into US cultural norms to serve future labor needs. The University of Guam was established in 1952, marking the start of higher education under US frameworks. Strategic military role, World War II, underscored Guam's strategic significance. Occupied by Japan in December 1941, Guam was retaken by US forces in July 1944. Post-war, Guam became a key pillar in America's Cold War and Pacific military posture. Naval Base Guam and Andersen Air Force Base remain central to US defense strategy in the region. Political and civil status today, Guamanians are US citizens but lack voting representation in Congress and cannot vote in presidential elections. Despite high military enlistment rates, Guam receives lower per capita federal benefits. US laws and policies often apply first and foremost to US strategic needs rather than local well-being. US imperialism in American Samoa, treaty division and navy rule. In 1900, the US and Germany divided Samoa. The Eastern Islands went to the US under the so-called Instrument of Cession, ratified by local Matais, chiefs, on behalf of Samoan people. The US Navy administered American Samoa until 1951. Traditional authority co-opted. Unlike Guam, in Samoa, the Matai structure was recognized and maintained, but only under US oversight. Power remained under Navy control, with local leaders acting within a colonial structure. Identity, citizenship, and nationality. American Samoans are US nationals, not full citizens. This unusual legal status means they can travel to the mainland, but lack full constitutional protections and cannot vote in US presidential elections. They also cannot run for certain federal offices. Strategic military presence, American Samoa has served as a naval coaling station and refueling site at Pago Pago. Its deepwater harbor remains strategically significant for US power projection in the Pacific. Cultural and educational impacts. American influence introduced English-based schooling, altered legal codes, and shifted social structures. While Matai governance persisted, American administrators shaped legislative processes and judicial institutions. Cultural assimilation pressures emerged alongside colonial economic restructuring. Common themes and legacies, paternalism and legal limbo, across Puerto Rico, Guam, and Samoa. US rule often presented itself as benevolent modernization. But systemic paternalism, through naval governors or appointed executives, meant local populations were subordinate. The insular cases legally positioned territories as not fully American, denying them constitutional rights. Economic exploitation. All three territories were shaped to serve US geopolitical and economic interests: cheap labor, plantation agriculture, industrial incentives, and military bases. Indigenous economies were reoriented, and many traditional livelihoods were undermined. Cultural erosion and resistance. American-led educational reforms, language policies, and institutional shifts marginalized local cultures. Yet resistance persisted from labor movements in Puerto Rico, to political advocacy in Guam, to cultural preservation in Samoa. Local voices continue to challenge colonial legacies and demand equality. Status deadlock. Puerto Rico remains an unincorporated US territory and commonwealth. Guam is an unincorporated organized territory. American Samoa is unincorporated and unorganized. Each lacks full political rights and full integration into US democracy, and status debates continue on all fronts. Conclusion. Call to action. In Voices from the Colonized, we center these stories because understanding history means more than recounting dates. It means listening to lived experience. These islands are still home to millions whose lives have been shaped by US imperial policy, limited rights, and ongoing economic dependency. If you found this episode meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to help us grow. Check the description to support our work, help us financially, so we can continue giving airtime to voices that have been marginalized. Let's honor the resilience and resistance of Puerto Rico, Guam, and Samoa. Their stories challenge us to rethink empire and to demand justice. Thank you for listening to Voices from the Colonized. Until next time, remember, like, share, and subscribe, and please see the description to help us financially.